stunning man sat down beside me and said, "Your husband is seeing my wife." Then he leaned in, smirked, and whispered, "Forget him. Come out with me tonight." I said, "Yes," immediately, and it changed my life. I was sitting in my usual spot at the Starbucks on Capitol Hill. Dinner, the one tucked into the corner near the window, trying to convince myself I was getting work done. I was 32 years old. A marketing director for a growing tech firm, and felt professionally capable of running a $500 million campaign. Yet personally incapable of facing my own life. My laptop was open, the screen displaying a spreadsheet I couldn't focus on. The coffee shop hummed around me with white noise. The hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of conversations, the rhythmic click of keyboards. But last night, family dinner, I preferred it here. Our house in Ballard had become too quiet, too heavy, with the weight of everything Andrew and I were not saying. "Ma?" He hadn't sat across from me. He had sat beside me, close enough that I could smell expensive, unfamiliar cologne and feel the immediate, jarring intensity of his presence. He was the kind of handsome that made a sharp, physical impression. Dark blonde hair, a jawline cut from granite, and eyes that were a startling blue, gray, holding a look that was both dangerous and intensely honest. He moved with a kind of assuredness that spoke of wealth and effortless power. I looked up from my laptop, confused, about to ask if the seat was taken, when he delivered the first 6 words. "Your husband is seeing my wife." My stomach dropped, an immediate hollow ache, and the sound of the coffee shop faded into a distant, underwater echo. I remember thinking, no, that's not right. That's a line from a movie. Andrew and I were distant, yes, but Andrew wasn't capable of this level of betrayal. Was he? My hands went instantly cold, the tips of my fingers numb against the lukewarm ceramic of my forgotten light. "I'm Marcus," he continued, his voice low, controlled, and utterly devastating. "And your husband, Andrew, has been sleeping with my wife, Elena, for the past 7 months. 7 months. It was a detail so precise, so calculated, that it stripped away any remaining doubt. 7 months was exactly when the distance had become noticeable, when the late nights had become routine, when Andrew started changing his passwords and buying the expensive cologne I never smelled on him at home. Marcus slid his phone across the small table toward me. The screen displayed a photograph. It was a candid shot, grainy but unmistakable. Andrew, my Andrew, was in it, his hand on a woman's face. Elena. His expression was one of tenderness, intimacy, and profound affection, a look I hadn't seen directed at me in over a year. The evidence was irrefutable. It was the complete picture I had been refusing to see for months. All the late nights, the defensiveness, the excuses, they clicked into place like the pieces of a horrible, unavoidable puzzle. I stared at the photo, feeling the core of the life I had so carefully constructed crack open. It wasn't the searing, hot pain of a fresh wound. It was colder, clearer. It was humiliation and absolute clarity. Andrew had made the decision to end our marriage a long time ago. I was just the last person to be informed. Marcus leaned closer, and I could feel the heat radiating off him. His smirk was slow, deliberate, edged with a dangerous mix of desperation and malice. It was a look of pure, coiled revenge. "Forget him," he whispered. "Come out with me tonight." Every rational, analytical part of my brain, the MBA I'd earned, the years of professional training, the lessons from my conflict, avoidant parents, screamed no. It was insane. It was reckless. It was the absolute worst possible reaction to a marital crisis. But I was tired of being rational. I was exhausted from being the wife who waited patiently, who believed the lies, who ignored her instincts and convinced herself she was the problem. I was suffocating under the weight of pretending. In that moment, staring at the handsome stranger who had just annihilated my life, I felt a terrifying rush of something I hadn't realized I'd lost. The ability to choose without fear of consequence. I wanted to be reckless. I wanted to feel something that wasn't exhaustion or hollow resignation. Yes, I said immediately. That single word, uttered in quiet coffee shop in the middle of a mundane Wednesday afternoon, was a promise and a detonation. It meant the end of the old Kara, the one who played by the rules and ended up betrayed. It meant the start of a life I didn't plan, one that felt frighteningly, completely alive. My name is Kara, and this is the story of how a stunning stranger destroyed my marriage and gave me back my life. I sat there, watching Marcus pull a business card from his wallet, scrawl his number on the back, and slide it toward me. Dinner. He gave me one last intense look that promised chaos and walked out without another word. I was left alone, holding a piece of cardstock. But last night at family dinner, watching the man who held the key to my future disappear into the afternoon crowd on Capitol Hill. The moment Marcus walked out of the coffee shop, the air shifted, heavy with the weight of the single, reckless word I had spoken. Yes. I sat there, frozen, the world rushing back in. The hiss of the espresso machine, the clatter of ceramic. Family dinner. The oblivious chatter of people whose lives had not just been detonated. I stared at the business card Marcus had left, simple and professional, with his number scrawled in confident, hurried handwriting on the back. But this piece of cardstock was now the physical proof that my entire reality was a staged farce. My first thought was action. I needed to see more. That one grainy photograph wasn't enough. I needed the complete picture. I needed to understand the scope of Andrew's deception, not just accept Marcus's word. I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over Andrew's contact. I could call him right now. I could shatter his comfortable lie with a single, furious question. But something stopped me. If I called now, he would lie. He would deny, deflect, and manipulate. Andrew was practiced. He had been lying successfully for 7 months, maybe longer. I was done being the person who believed him, because believing was easier than facing the truth. Instead, I opened the location sharing app we had set up years ago, ostensibly for coordinating dinner times and checking in when one of us was traveling. I hadn't checked it in months. I hadn't needed to. The app loaded slowly. A map of Seattle appeared, and there was Andrew's blue dot. He wasn't at his office downtown. He wasn't at a client site. He was in Queen Anne, at an address I did not recognize. It was a high-rise building. Sleek. Modern, the kind of expensive apartment young professionals with money rented. The betrayal felt fresh and sharp all over again. It was 2:30 in the afternoon. Andrew had texted me that morning saying he was going to be working late again, a client dinner. Instead, he was at her apartment in the middle of a workday. I sat staring at that blue dot, feeling the last pieces of denial crumble away into dust. This wasn't a fling in a cheap hotel room. This was calculated. This was a second life he was running while I was sitting at home, or in this coffee shop, waiting for him to remember me. The humiliation burned hotter than the betrayal itself. I slammed my laptop shut, shoved it into my bag along with Marcus's card, and walked out into the cool, overcast October afternoon. I needed to move. I started walking without a destination, the cold anger giving way to a desperate, urgent energy. But last night at family dinner, my thoughts were a torrent of painful realization. Andrew had told me I was paranoid, that I was creating problems where there were none. He hadn't just cheated. He had gaslit me into doubting my own instincts. He made me feel crazy for noticing the cologne I never smelled. The phone, face, down on the counter, the changed passcode. I had accepted his excuses, blamed myself, and wondered if I should try harder, cook better meals, lose a few pounds, be more interesting. I remembered the jewelry receipt I had found 2 months prior. A purchase for over $2,000 from a high-end boutique. I had asked him about it casually. He'd said it was for a client, a business relationship he was cultivating. I had believed him. I had believed him because the alternative, that he was buying expensive gifts for a woman he saw in the middle of the day, was too painful, too real to consider. The raw anger hit me with the force of a physical blow. He hadn't just made a mistake, he had made a fool of me. I decided I needed to go home. Not to confront him. He was still with Elena, enjoying his stolen afternoon. But to see the house with new eyes. I needed to look at the life we had built and determine how much of it was real and how much had been a stage. The drive to our craftsman house in Ballard was a blur. Andrew's car was, of course, gone. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The afternoon light streamed through the windows, illuminating the lies. The wedding photos on the mantel, us laughing and kissing, felt like evidence from a cold case. The living room, the kitchen, the bedroom. Every corner was tainted by his secret. I walked straight to the nightstand on Andrew's side of the bed. I opened the drawer. Inside, it was exactly as I had feared. The expensive, sleek black cologne bottle I had never seen him use at home. And a small leather-bound notebook. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, in Andrew's precise, controlled handwriting, were dates, times, and abbreviations. QE's apt. The Queen Anne apartment. Front Marriott. The hotel Marcus must have hired the private investigator to track. And then, the ultimate betrayal San Juan Island's B&B. Father. Followed by dates that matched the weekend 3 months ago, when Andrew had claimed he was at a work conference in Portland. He had taken her to the romantic island getaway. We'd talked about visiting for our own anniversary. I put the notebook down and searched further. On the top shelf of his closet, hidden behind old college yearbooks, I found a shoebox. Inside it, a stack of hotel receipts going back 7 months. Yeah. Confirming the notebook. Beneath them, on expensive stationery, a handwritten card. It was simple, elegant, signed only with the letter E. Counting the days until I see you again. You make everything better. It was not just physical. It was emotional. This was a relationship, something with depth. And history built entirely on deception. I put everything back exactly as I found it. I was done being the person who believed him. The marriage was over. Andrew had made that decision for me. Dinner? The only thing left was for me to acknowledge it and determine my next move. My phone vibrated on the counter. Andrew. It rang twice before I declined the call. Seconds later, a text appeared. Just checking in. How's your day going? The casual tone. The fake concern, like he hadn't been caught red-handed at his mistress's apartment an hour ago. The lie came so easily to him. So smoothly. I typed back, my fingers slow and deliberate. Fine. Busy with work. His immediate reply, same here. Crazy day. Probably going to run late again. Love you. Love you. 2 words he typed reflexively, meaninglessly. No problem. I wrote back. Take your time. I dropped my phone on the counter and walked out of the house. I had made my choice. I was done waiting for him. I was gonna meet Marcus. My last conversation with Andrew? A brief text exchange where he lied about working late was the final confirmation that my night with Marcus wasn't a mistake. But last night at family dinner, but a necessary act of rebellion, I drove away from the hollow house in Ballard, my hands gripping the wheel, feeling the surge of cold. Focused determination. I needed an alibi, but more than that, I needed to touch base with reality, which was Rebecca. I pulled over and sent my best friend, Rebecca Chen, a cryptic text. Can't do coffee tomorrow. Something huge came up. I'll explain soon. Her response was instantaneous and laced with worry. Everything okay? You've been MIA. I typed back quickly. A half lie that felt necessary to buy time. I'm fine, promise. Just dealing with something unexpected. I'll call you later tonight or tomorrow morning, depending. Rebecca, bless her steady pediatric nurse soul, simply replied, I'm here. Day or night, I mean it. That text was a grounding anchor in the sudden storm of my life. I knew. Eventually, I would tell her everything, and she would stand by me. But tonight, I needed to make a different choice. I drove toward downtown, toward Pike Street. The Nest was exactly the kind of upscale, discreet bar I expected Marcus Thorne to choose. It was on the 8th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, where the late afternoon sun was just starting to turn the water a dark, reflective steel gray. Soft, expensive jazz drifted through the room. I spotted Marcus immediately. He was leaning against the bar, impeccably dressed in dark jeans and a fitted navy button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He exuded an air of casual, effortless power. When he saw me walking toward him, his face changed. The calculated smirk from the coffee shop softened, replaced by a look of genuine, palpable relief. You actually came, he said, his voice dropping slightly to be heard over the background music. Did you think I wouldn't? I asked. My voice sounded steady, betraying none of the chaos churning inside me. I thought there was a 50 chance you'd go home, shred my card, and decide I was just some crazy person who ambushed you at a Starbucks. He admitted, signaling the bartender. I'm really glad you didn't. I approached the bar, taking the stool he gestured toward. Honestly, I considered it, I said. What changed your mind? I went home. I confessed, the words tasting like ash. I tracked Andrew's phone. I went through his things. I found the receipts, the notebook, the card from Elena. 7 months of calculated deception, Marcus. Not 6, but 7. He had been planning this life while pretending to maintain ours. I realized confronting him wouldn't change anything. He already made his choice. Now I'm making mine. Something flickered in his eyes, a dark mixture of understanding and grim satisfaction. 7 months? He repeated, shaking his head. Elena told me 6. Of course, she lied to me too. It's the constant, isn't it? The lie is the foundation. Marcus ordered a whiskey, neat. I ordered an old-fashioned. Last night at family dinner. It felt like a drink chosen by someone who had just decided to become reckless. We took our drinks and settled into a private booth in the corner, the Seattle skyline glittering below us in the fading light. What happens now? I asked. Marcus took a long sip of his drink. I filed for separation 3 days ago. But that's the legal timeline. The emotional reality is that our marriages have been over for a long time. We were both just the last people to know. I nodded, feeling the pain of his shared experience. Tell me about Elena. You were married for 6 years? 6 years, together for 12. He confirmed. I met in college. She's ambitious, driven, pre-law. Now a partner in a major firm. I liked that about her initially, the fire. But somewhere along the way, her ambition became the only thing that mattered. I wanted a family, a home. She wanted the corner office and a 70-hour work week. I became background noise. It sounded painfully familiar. Andrew was the same, I admitted, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. He traded genuine connection for a promotion. We went from talking all night to having conversations that were purely transactional. Who buys groceries? What time do we leave for his event? The quiet death of intimacy. You don't notice the water evaporating until the glass is empty. He met my eyes, and for the first time, I felt truly seen. That's exactly it. That slow, quiet erosion. But you're the one who sought me out. I pressed, needing to push past the shared pain and understand the core of his actions. You found me. You didn't just want the truth told. You wanted me here, tonight. Why? He paused, studying the glass in his hand. Honestly, Kara. The investigator's report had your name and address. I wanted revenge. I wanted Andrew and Elena to know what it feels like to be on the other side. To come home and realize your spouse isn't waiting. Barter isn't sitting. They're being faithful while you're out building your secret life. He looked up, his blue-gray eyes intense and unnervingly honest. But there's more to it now. But last night at family dinner, I wanted to when Andrew was willing to risk everything to betray. And now that I realize this isn't just about revenge for me. Not anymore. What is it about? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, leaning in, drawn by the profound honesty in his confession. It's about this. Marcus said simply. This conversation, the fact that I've known you for less than 6 hours, and I already feel more connected to you than I have to my wife in the last 2 years. I wanted honesty. And you gave it to me by walking out of that house tonight instead of making excuses. I wanted real. And I think you might be real. The shift was complete. The transaction of revenge had dissolved into a genuine, reckless gamble on connection. And I found, to my absolute surprise, that I wasn't scared of the chaos he promised. I was terrified of going back to the stillness. I understood why he wanted revenge, but when Marcus looked at me across the table, I knew this had already become something else, something real and terrifyingly honest. I know it's crazy, Marcus admitted, his voice barely a murmur. We're both still technically married, and we met because our spouses are having an affair. The timing is atrocious. But I don't regret walking up to your table today. Not for a second. I looked at his hand, resting near my glass on the dark wood of the table. I felt a desperate urge to reach out and touch him, a need for physical grounding that went beyond simple attraction. The connection we shared, forged in mutual betrayal, was faster, cleaner, and more honest than anything I had felt with Andrew in years. I don't regret saying yes, either, I whispered, meeting his intense gaze. Marcus's smirk returned, but this time it was genuine, a smile that reached his blue, gray eyes, erasing the danger and leaving vulnerability. Good. We stayed at the nest for another hour, finishing our drinks. The conversation shifted. Dinner. Moving away from the pain of our old marriages and into the landscape of who we were and who we had once dreamed of being. Marcus talked about his architecture firm, his passion for designing affordable community housing, last night at family dinner, and how Elena always pushed him toward commercial luxury developments where the real money was. He talked about his parents, who had been married 42 years and still held hands at the dinner table. They were his impossible gold standard. I kept thinking if I just tried harder, we'd get there, he confessed. I kept trying to force Elena into that partnership model. I told him about my parents in Spokane, who were still married, but who coexisted rather than lived together. They were functional, not passionate. They ran out of things to talk about 20 years ago and decided silence was easier. Marcus leaned forward, his focus absolute. Is that what scared you about your marriage? Becoming your parents? His question hit me with profound insight. I had never articulated the fear out loud, but there it was. Andrew and I had once talked for hours, late into the night, about books, politics, and silly dreams. Then, the talking had stopped. Family dinner. And I had been convincing myself for 3 years that every couple eventually runs out of things to say. That silence was normal. Maybe? I admitted, my voice thick with sudden realization. I told myself that silence was just the next phase. That we'd settled. I was so afraid of the marriage failing that I kept settling for less and less until I was basically suffocating. It's not normal, Marcus stated simply. And it doesn't have to be. Around midnight, Marcus paid the tab, and we left the controlled intimacy of the bar for the cool, crisp Seattle night. We walked along the pier, the dark water of the bay reflecting the glittering skyline. When did you stop being happy? Marcus asked suddenly, his voice quiet. I thought about it, about the gradual erosion of the life I loved. I don't think it was one single moment. It was gradual. Like watching a sunset where you don't notice it getting dark until you're already in shadow. Marcus stopped walking, turning to face me fully on the pier. That's exactly it. That's exactly what it was like with Elena. We stood there, damn, the city hum vibrating around us. He stepped closer, the distance between us vanishing. I could feel the warmth radiating from his body, the intensity in his eyes. Hannah, Marcus said softly, using my full name. I know this is insane. We met this afternoon, but I don't regret any of it. Neither do I whispered. He was close enough now that I could feel his breath. He was stunning. A dangerous proposition, a man who had delivered the worst news of my life, and yet made me feel the most centered. Can I kiss you? He asked. Dinner. It wasn't an assumption. It was an explicit question of choice and consent, something Andrew had stopped offering years ago. Every rational thought in my head screamed that I was still married, that this was moving too fast, that I needed to go home and call a lawyer. But I was done listening to the rational voice that had let me be made a fool. Yes, I said. He kissed me. It was not tentative or apologetic. It was certain, deep, and utterly real. It was a kiss that confirmed the dangerous promise he had made in the coffee shop. Dinner. The promise that this chaos could lead to life. I said, yes, immediately, and it changed my life. I thought back to shocking moment when a stunning man sat down beside me and said, "Your husband is seeing my wife." Then he leaned in, smirked, and whispered, "Forget him. Come out with me tonight." That moment, that instant, had been the genesis of my new life. It was here, on this pier, that I confirmed that reckless choice was the best one I had ever made. When we finally pulled apart, both of us breathless. But Marcus rested his forehead against mine. "Come home with me," he murmured. I should have said no. I should have reminded myself of the countless reasons why this was a terrible idea. But the old Kara was gone. "Yes," I whispered again. I woke up in Marcus's loft, his arm around me, feeling something I hadn't felt in years centered. Dawn was breaking over South Lake Union, casting long shadows across his modern, architectural space. We had slept, truly slept, exhausted from the emotional toll of the day. But we hadn't been intimate beyond holding each other. Family dinner. The physical closeness with someone who understood the precise depth of my ruin was more comforting than any pretense of passion could have been. I slipped out of bed around 7 o'clock, retrieved my clothes, and found my phone. I had 3 missed calls from Andrew and a flurry of texts. "Where are you?" "Getting worried." "Call me." Getting worried. The sheer audacity of the lie almost made me laugh. He was worried about the disruption to his schedule, the unexpected variable in his carefully managed life. I typed a concise, emotionless response. Stayed at Rebecca's. Needed space to think. Coming home soon. His reply was immediate. "Okay. See you soon?" "No. Are you okay?" "No. What's wrong?" "Just the functional but transactional response of a man whose primary concern was maintaining routine. I drove back to the Ballard house alone, but the rising sun illuminating the final, unavoidable task ahead. I had considered asking Marcus to come with me, but this was something I had to do by myself. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about self-respect. Andrew had to see that I was capable of leaving, not just reacting. I parked my car, walked to the front door, and used my key. Andrew was in the kitchen, making his morning coffee. He was in the navy suit I had bought him for his birthday. Perfectly tailored. Perfectly composed. He barely glanced up from his phone when I walked in. "How's Rebecca?" he asked absently. I set my purse down on the counter, the sound loud in the morning quiet. I took a deep breath, letting the final vestiges of my old life drain away. "I wouldn't know," I said. "I didn't stay with Rebecca." That got his attention. His head snapped up. The confusion in his eyes was genuine, quickly followed by a flicker of fear. "What?" I walked closer, my voice calm, level, and utterly devoid of warmth. "I stayed with Marcus. Elena's husband. You know. The woman you've been sleeping with for the past 7 months. The color drained from Andrew's face so rapidly he looked instantly gray. His phone clattered from his hand onto the marble countertop. "Kara, don't." His voice was a thin, panicked whisper. I held up my hand, stopping him before the denial could even begin. "I don't want explanations. I don't want apologies. I don't want to hear that it meant nothing or that you still love me. I just want a divorce." The word hung between us, heavy and final. Andrew looked truly shocked, a deer in the headlights, as if the possibility of facing consequences had never once occurred to his entitled mind. "How did you?" he stammered. "Marcus found me." I interrupted, my control absolute. Showed me photos, told me everything. Then I came home and found the rest myself. The notebook in your nightstand, the shoebox of hotel receipts, the card from Elena. His jaw worked. "You went through my things?" I almost laughed. That was his immediate concern. My invasion of his privacy? Andrew, please? His voice cracked. Desperate. We can work through this. It was a mistake. She doesn't mean anything. I was confused. Stop, I said firmly. Just stop. I walked past him toward our bedroom, pulling my largest suitcase from the closet. He followed me. His words tumbling out in a desperate, panicked rush. He'd been stressed. Work was overwhelming. He loved me. He'd do anything to fix this. Couples therapy. Moving. A fresh start. Anything I wanted. I began packing my clothes, only my clothes, ignoring the shared memory of the room. You had 7 months to choose me, I said quietly, zipping the suitcase closed. 7 months to decide our marriage was worth fighting for. You chose her every single day. You chose her. Now, I'm choosing me. But I love you? He begged, watching me pick up the bag. No, you don't. You love the idea of having me as backup. Someone to come home to when Elena is too busy. Someone to make you feel like a good person, while you built a secret life. You don't actually love me. If you did, you never would have done this. Andrew's face crumpled. So that's it? You're just giving up? I'm not giving up, I said, turning toward the door. You already did that. I'm just acknowledging it. As I reached the threshold, Andrew grabbed my arm. His voice, for the first time, was sharp, cold, and laced with accusation. You said you stayed with Marcus. Elena's husband. What does that mean? Kara. I looked at his hand on my arm, then into his miserable, suddenly fearful eyes. Exactly what you think it means, I said. I pulled free and walked out of the bedroom. Out of the house. Out of the marriage. Andrew called my name, following me to the driveway. But I was already putting my suitcase in the car, getting in, and driving away. In my rearview mirror, I saw him standing there, framed by the life we were supposed to share, looking lost and smaller than I had ever seen him. I felt nothing. No guilt. No sadness. Just the glorious, terrifying emptiness of total freedom. The silence in the car as I drove away wasn't sad. It was the loudest, most glorious sound of freedom I had ever heard. Andrew continued to call and text as I drove, a frantic, desperate barrage of pleas and apologies that I muted, without reading. Don't throw away 5 years over one mistake. One text read. One mistake. 7 months of calculated deception was reduced to a single error in judgment. It only reinforced the hollowness of his character. I turned my phone to silent and drove aimlessly until I ended up at a small coffee shop in Fremont I'd never visited before. I sat there, a parsemliner, sipping a latte I barely tasted, and pulled out my laptop. I couldn't go back to the house. The sight of it felt poisoned. Every room a monument to the beautiful lie I'd helped maintain. I needed a place to land, a space that was unequivocally mine. I opened a real estate app and began searching for apartments. Something small, temporary, with a short-term lease. Within an hour, I found a compact one-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill, an area close to work and, ironically, but close to the Starbucks, where all this chaos had begun less than 24 hours ago. It was available immediately. I called the landlord, scheduled a viewing for that afternoon, and signed a 6-month lease 2 hours later. By early evening, I had a new address and an empty, echoing apartment. I finally texted Rebecca, my best friend. Can you help me move some things tomorrow? I left Andrew. Her response came back within seconds, no questions asked, only affirmation. Oh my God. Yes, I'm coming over right now. Where are you? When she arrived 20 minutes later, she didn't bring questions. She brought takeout Thai food and a good bottle of red wine. We sat on the floor of the empty living room, the city lights streaming in through the large window. I told her the condensed truth, the essential facts. Marcus, the photo, the evidence I found at home, and the confrontation. But last night at family dinner, I intentionally left out the intimate details of the night I spent talking and crying in Marcus's loft. That felt too complicated, too raw, to share. Yet, it was a truth I still needed to process alone. Rebecca listened, her eyes wide, occasionally reaching out to squeeze my hand. When I finished, she didn't offer pity or shock. She pulled me into a hard, anchoring hug. "I'm proud of you, Kara," she said firmly. "For what? My marriage just ended." "For choosing yourself," she repeated. "You could have stayed. You could have tried to fix it." Which is what Andrew wanted. "You could have let him convince you that you were equally at fault. Instead, you walked away with your dignity. That takes guts." Her words were vital. For years, I had been trying to be the perfect, accommodating wife. Now, choosing my own path. My own painful clarity felt revolutionary. We made a plan to go back to the house the next day, when Andrew would likely be at the office, attempting to salvage his professional life. We focused on a list of essential items: clothing, my books, my laptop, things that were definitively mine. I had no desire for any of the furniture or shared belongings. They felt tainted. That night, pied at family dinner, I slept on a borrowed air mattress in the middle of my empty apartment. It should have felt depressing, but instead, it felt like the most expansive freedom I had ever known. The next morning, Rebecca and I drove the 4 miles back to the Ballard house in her SUV. Andrew's car was gone, confirming he was at work. The house felt smaller, less significant than it had the day before. We worked quickly, loading boxes of my clothes, my personal art, and my books. Dinner. As we were loading the last small box into the back of Rebecca's SUV, Andrew's car pulled into the driveway. My stomach dropped, but the fear was replaced instantly by a chilling calm. "Want me to handle this?" Rebecca asked, stepping forward protectively. "No," I said, putting my hand on her arm. "I've got it." Andrew got out of his car slowly. He looked terrible. Rumpled suit, dark circles under his eyes, the absolute picture of a man who hadn't slept, wrestling with consequences.
Good, I thought.
A cold, petty satisfaction running through me. "Kara," he began, moving toward me. "Please, can we talk? I ended it with Elena this morning. Told her it was over. I want to fix my marriage." I looked at him. The man I had loved. The man who had lied to my face for 7 months. "You ended it because you got caught," I said, closing the trunk of the SUV. "Not because you wanted to. If Marcus hadn't found me, you'd still be seeing her." "That's not true." "It is true." I cut him off. "And even if you did end it, that doesn't change what you did. You made me doubt myself. Made me feel crazy for noticing something was wrong. That's not love, Andrew. That's manipulation." His face crumbled. "I love you. I made a mistake. Please don't throw away 5 years." "You threw them away," I said. "Not me." I got into the passenger seat of Rebecca's UV. She started the engine. Andrew stood in the driveway, watching us drive away. Looking defeated. A small, sad silhouette against the backdrop of a life that no longer belonged to me. I felt nothing for him. No satisfaction. No sympathy. Just the strange, quiet emptiness of final closure. The future was terrifyingly uncertain, but for the first time, It was entirely my own. My apartment may have been ugly and temporary, but it was mine. A space free of Andrew's lies. The only complications came from the honest man who walked into my life. Over the next week, I focused on furnishing the Capitol Hill apartment with absolute basics: a cheap bed frame, a small, functional kitchen table, and some shelves from IKEA. Everything was new, unburdened by shared history. It was a space to breathe, a clean slate. Marcus texted me every day. His communication was consistent but never pushy. A simple check in, an offer of support, a recommendation for a good architecture documentary. It was the calm assurance of a presence, a grounding force in the chaos I was navigating. We met for coffee 4 days after I had left Andrew. But we chose a small, anonymous shop several blocks away from the Starbucks, where we had first met, consciously seeking a neutral territory. "How are you holding up?" Marcus asked, his eyes serious as he watched me. "Honestly, better than I expected," I admitted, taking a sip of my dark roast. "The apartment is tiny, the furniture is terrible, but it's mine. There's no emotional baggage, no performance. Just space to figure things out." "I get that entirely," he said. After Elena and I separated, I felt the same way, like I could finally think clearly. He told me he had officially filed for divorce the day before. His lawyer was thorough, presenting the investigators' evidence. The photos, the receipts, the timeline. The lawyer wanted the record clear. Marcus explained. Elena's law firm has strict policies about professional conduct, and Andrew, apparently, worked with several of Elena's high-profile clients. A cold, grim look crossed Marcus's face. Her firm found out. They gave her a choice: dinner. Resign voluntarily with a severance package, or be terminated for ethics violations. She chose the severance. I sat there absorbing the news. Elena, the ambitious architect of Andrew's affair, was facing real professional consequences. Part of me felt a cold sense of vindication. But mostly, I just felt tired. This whole saga was exhausting. Andrew is not faring much better. I contributed, pulling a small thread on my napkin. Rebecca heard through her network that he was passed over for that vice president promotion he'd been working toward. Officially, they cited professional judgment and leadership qualities. Unofficially, everyone knows the firm takes a dim view of affairs that create public embarrassment. Funny how that works, Marcus murmured. They think they can lie and cheat without consequences. And then reality hits. The conversation turned back to us, to the precarious thing we were building. "Can I ask you something that needs an honest answer?" Marcus asked, setting down his coffee cup. "Sir." "Are you doing this? Seeing me? Because you want to, or because you're trying to hurt Andrew?" The question was fair, and exactly the kind of direct honesty I desperately needed. At first, I admitted, meeting his gaze, the impulse was definitely partly revenge. That first night was reckless, desperate. But no, Marcus. I'm here because I want to be here. Because talking to you feels easy. Like I don't have to pretend or perform. He reached across the table and took my hand, his touch warm and firm. Good. Because I'm not interested in being anyone's revenge plot. I want this to be real. Me too, I said. Our relationship progressed slowly and intentionally after that. We met for coffee, went on long walks through Seattle neighborhoods, and had dinner at quiet restaurants where we could talk for hours without interruption. We shared our complicated family histories, our vulnerabilities, and the specific ways we felt our partners had failed us. We were learning what we actually wanted in life, not what we thought we should want. 3 weeks later, Rebecca insisted on meeting him. She was fiercely protective, and her approval meant everything to me. We met for brunch at her favorite spot in Fremont. Marcus arrived exactly on time, polished yet relaxed. Dinner. He shook Rebecca's hand, asked genuine questions about her work as a pediatric nurse, and made her laugh with a self-deprecating story about a disastrous community project design. Halfway through the meal, but Marcus excused himself to use the restroom. The second he was out of earshot, Rebecca leaned across the table. "Okay," she said, her voice dropping. "He's unfairly handsome. I was prepared to hate him on principle because of how this started, but he seems genuine." "You think so, Kara? I really like him," I confessed, feeling a blush rise on my cheeks. Rebecca reached out and squeezed my hand. "I can tell. But last night at family dinner, he looks at you like you hung the moon, like you're the most interesting person he's ever met." "Andrew never looked at you like that." "Dinner. Not. Even in the beginning." Her observation, that Andrew's affection had always been performative or transactional, hit me harder than I expected. Marcus's attention felt validating and real. "Just be careful," Rebecca cautioned, the responsible friend emerging. "You're still rebuilding. Make sure you're doing this for the right reasons." "I am," I promised her. "I promise." When Marcus returned, but last night at family dinner, the three of us talked like old friends. By the time we left, Rebecca pulled me aside one last time. "He's good for you," she said, her face radiating approval. "I approve." That validation settled something deep within me. As Marcus and I walked to our cars, he took my hand. "Your friend is great," he said. "She liked you, too," I replied. "Good," he said, stopping me on the sidewalk. "Because her opinion matters to you, and what matters to you matters to me." We stood there, two people rebuilding in the wreckage, choosing honesty over comfort. And for the first time in my life, I felt the certainty that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The feeling that grew between us stopped feeling like something new and fragile, and started feeling like home. Over the next few months, what Marcus and I had wasn't built on stolen moments or deception. It was built on honesty, on showing up as ourselves, baggage and all. We established routine Sunday mornings at the farmer's market, Wednesday evenings cooking dinner, nights spent talking about our goals, not just the ones for our careers, but for ourselves. My news continued to filter through Rebecca's network regarding Andrew and Elena. Their relationship was imploding. A fight, family dinner. It turned out the excitement was only there when it was secret. Once they were both single and trying to build a public life together, reality hit. They fought constantly about money, jobs, and, most frequently, whose fault it was that they had lost everything. Elena blamed Andrew for being careless. Andrew blamed Elena for being too ambitious. They were discovering that what they had wasn't real, but was just an escape from their actual problems. I heard the updates with a detached sense of distance, like hearing about strangers. There was no vindication, just the cold acknowledgement that deception couldn't sustain them. Us, Elea Fanner. It was 8 months after I had walked out on Andrew when the moment I had half dreaded and half expected finally happened. Marcus and I were at a new Italian restaurant in Belltown, talking about his latest community design project, when I saw them. Andrew and Elena were seated across the room. Marcus's jaw tightened immediately when he followed my gaze. "We can leave," he said quietly, his hand finding mine under the table. No, I said, squeezing his hand. We were here first. We're staying. I forced myself to look at them. They were sitting opposite each other, the body language of two people enduring dinner, rather than enjoying it. Elena looked armored, thinner, her expression hard. Andrew looked tired, older, the old confidence replaced by something diminished and defensive. They were arguing. They don't look happy, Marcus observed. No, I agreed. They don't. As Marcus and I were leaving, Andrew looked up. Our eyes met across the restaurant. His face went pale. He said something to Elena, and she turned. But family dinner. Her expression hardening into furious resentment when she saw Marcus's hand resting protectively on the small of my back. Andrew stood up, hesitating for only a second before walking toward us. Elena remained seated, a statue of impotent fury. Kara, Andrew said, his voice pleading. Can we talk? I want you to know I'm sorry for everything. I was selfish and stupid, and I destroyed the best thing I ever had. I looked at him. This man I had loved. He looked smaller somehow, hollowed out. I didn't feel anger or hurt. I felt nothing but a quiet, calm finality. I appreciate that, Andrew, I said, my voice even. But I've moved on. You should too. His eyes flicked to Marcus, who stood silently beside me, a solid, unwavering presence. You're with him? That's not your business anymore, I said. He looked devastated, like he had held on to the fantasy that I might, eventually, come back. That hope was extinguished now. Goodbye, Andrew, I said. Marcus guided me toward the exit. Once we were outside in the cool evening air, I felt the tension bleed away.
You okay?
Marcus asked. Yeah, I said, and I meant it. I didn't feel anything. Like running into an old acquaintance I used to know a long time ago. That's growth, is it? Marcus said, pulling me closer. It means you've really moved on. A few months later, my 6-month lease on the small Capitol Hill apartment was up. It had served its purpose. A life raft in the storm, but it felt temporary. We were having dinner at Marcus's loft one evening when he brought it up. Your lease is up next month. Yeah. I've been meaning to look for something new, maybe a 2-bedroom, I replied. Marcus set down his fork. Or you could move in here. I looked at him, searching his face. Are you sure? It's different than making it official. Kara. You're here 5 nights a week. Your toothbrush is in my bathroom. Your clothes are in my closet. We're already living together in everything but name. I'm not asking because it's convenient, he added, his voice low and sincere. I'm asking because I can't imagine waking up anywhere that doesn't include you. I want this to be our space. Not mine. Tears pricked my eyes. Tears of absolute happiness and relief. Yes, I said. Absolutely. Yes. Moving in together was seamless. We painted the loft, combined our books, and merged our lives into a cohesive, shared space. 2 years after that first kiss on the waterfront pier, Marcus took me back to that exact spot. The Seattle skyline glittered against the dark water, the air cool and clear, just like that first night. Why are we here? I asked, though I suspected I knew. Marcus took both my hands. Because this is where everything changed for both of us. This is where we stopped drowning in bad marriages and started being something else. He let go of my hands and got down on one knee. My breath caught in my throat. I know this started in chaos, Marcus said, pulling a small box from his jacket pocket. I know I walked into your life and blew it up without asking permission. But somewhere in the wreckage, he continued, his voice catching slightly, I found the best thing that ever happened to me. You're honest. You're brave. You chose yourself when it would have been easier to stay small and keep pretending. He opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant stone. I want to spend the rest of my life choosing you back, Kara. Marry me, not to replace what we lost, but to build something better. I said yes through happy tears. We got married 6 months later, in a beautiful botanical garden. Rebecca stood beside me as my maid of honor, crying happy tears through the entire ceremony. My parents were there, watching with proud smiles. My father squeezed my shoulder later and simply said, "You seem happy, Kara." Truly happy. Later that evening, Marcus and I stood on the dance floor, his arms wrapped around me. "What are you thinking?" he whispered. "That my life is nothing like I planned," I said. "And I wouldn't change a single thing. Not even the messy beginning. Especially not the messy beginning. Without it, I wouldn't be here. I love you, Kara. Thank you for taking a chance on me. I love you, too," I replied. "And thank you for giving me the truth, even when it hurt." We danced in comfortable silence. Two people who had been broken and decided to build something real from the pieces. We walked out into the Seattle night, hand in hand, starting the next chapter of our lives together. And it all began with 6 words from a stranger I didn't know. Because sometimes, the door you're terrified to walk through is the one that leads you home.